We're having or continuing on with our discussion about how do we want to treat the library and the museum budgets, and do we want to treat them the same or differently from the town? And so we're still entertaining any discussions on that, because we need to decide how we want to deal with them. So just what Brian was just telling me, that the library ask is an additional $29,621 as compared to 2018. So they're asking for an additional $30 or $30,000, and we weren't.
Is that split?
Yeah, that's and 15 each.
30,000, so
Oh, that's 15 each, is it?
Is that 15 each? Is that, or is it
No,
60,000?
that's a $30,000 increase to the library budget.
Yeah, that's ours.
So it's 15 each.
Oh, sorry, each.
Each municipality.
Yes.
So it's a $15,000 each. Okay. And what?
No,
Does that include the audit amount that you're saying that?
No.
That's different.
No.
No.
What's your budget say? I don't have my library budget.
I've got their condensed budget draft that we approved, and the condensed budget that we approved is $215,358. They get a municipal grant of $16,650, and that matches. And Big Lakes County is the same as our grant plus the Alberta Municipal Affairs Library operating grant. So that's where they tie at 232, and then they get a library revenue library revenue's in there, an employment grant, and GST rebate to get up to their total one of 496,216.
But they don't need to know what the revenue is.
Yeah.
They want to know what they're asking.
So basically, they're asking from us $215,358.
215,000.
That's what I've got on here, and this is the one that we approved. $215,358.
Okay, so if that's what they're asking is 215, and last year they were asking for
201.
huh?
201.
201.
So it's 15,000 increase for each municipality.
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay. So 14,000 for each municipal. 15 for each municipality. Okay. And at the museum, what is their ask? Additional ask?
They're asking for a new position.
Yeah.
So that's a larger increase for that reason.
But do we know the total on it?
Wow.
It's
I haven't got it
30,000, I think it was.
No, 45.
Yeah.
40.
Museum.
I have a copy of it here if you want to look at it.
$32,000 extra from the town.
32,000.
That's under a different. It's under a
And
different.
part of that, I know now we have already committed to them $7,000 for the Visitor Information Center. Is that included in the?
No, it's not. It's in a separate item. It's in a different function. It's under tourism.
Oh, okay.
So it's not, the Visitor Information Center is not included in that.
Okay, that's not part of it.
It's a separate issue.
So that's another 7. Was it 8 or 7?
It's it went from 7 to 15, so it's an 8 increase. It's double for the Visitor Information Center.
Oh, it's 8,000 for each municipality.
Extra.
There's not a split. It's not a split. The museum is not.
No, the Visitor Information's, yes, yes, yeah. Okay, so the ask from the museum, so we're taking that Visitor Information Center ask of an additional 8,000 is not included. They're asking for 32,000 more on that.
The museum is asking for $32,000 more. It's not a wage increase. It's to cover a new position.
Yep.
Because Darlene is basically the only one working there.
We're not paying all of it.
And
We're just looking at what we're paying. We don't care what the county pays.
it's a little tough to be the one person at the museum. So with the added cost of having another staff member, that alleviates some of the pressure on Darlene, as I said before, because she's the only worker. She probably has 6 months of holidays that we can't pay her for. can't take holidays because we don't have somebody to replace her and do the other stuff that needs to get done.
Okay,
Now, with the 15,000 increase on the visitor information, the 14,000 that was split between the county and the town, initially that 14,000 was, before the museum took it over, that $14,000 was to cover the tourist booth for 4 months. So now you've asked the museum to be the visitor information center for a whole year, but you're only giving them 4 months of wages. So if you want the museum to be the visitor information center, they want that increase to cover those wages.
yeah, and we have already approved that for them. Like, we approved that in a separate motion for that visitor information center expense. So that part is done. What's that?
No, we didn't. I don't remember
Oh, I
that.
thought we did
No.
approve that.
No.
So what's the total?
It was sent to budget deliberations.
Oh, I thought we had
Nope,
approved
nope,
that.
nope,
Oh,
nope.
okay,
No.
so we have the request from the museum, and then we have a visitor information center request.
Roughly 40,000?
Right. And when we were having the discussions earlier, I said I look at the museum differently than I look at the library and the rec board. And the reason that I do that is the library, or the museum gets no money from the county. They apply like for their grant, and they either get it or they don't. It's not a guarantee. I mean, they've gotten it quarterly all the time. But I look at what the library has done, or the museum has done in terms of trying to offset some of the costs to the town. Number one, they applied for the grant and got the money for the wall.
Yes.
Number two, they apply regularly and get casinos to increase their revenue, so they have operating dollars. We have a casino coming up in April. Darlene squanders and searches grants continually. She applied to the Friesen Brothers. She ended up getting $4,500 there for programming. She applied to the Alberta Museum Association Operation Grant, which is very competitive, and actually I just got a letter from Darlene that our application was accepted, and they were awarded $25,000 to be used for operational staffing, which will supplement the position of the executive director. So I mean, the museum and I shouldn't say the museum, I should say Darlene.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just a staff member that's going the extra mile, not so much that if she was not there, we'd have to deal with the budget as it is, right?
True, but you probably wouldn't have the person that you have in Darlene as the director of that museum, because I mean, this is a woman who has taken courses on her own time, who's gone to England to take the courses to be a better curator, to be a better museum director. So it benefits the town and it benefits everyone. So when I look at what the museum is requesting and all the stuff that they've done to try and supplement what they get, that's why I look at them differently. To me, they've been, since I've been on council, their budget has been 60, 61, 62.
I can elaborate on that. When I checked back, I think I checked back 8 years. I didn't go further back than that. It has not changed for 8 years, which is why last year I recommended council increase it just like everybody else. And that was the first time it had ever been increased in 8 years.
So, as I said, that's why I look at the museum in a different light in comparison to the increases that the rec board is asking or the increases that the library is asking. Because to me, these are, It's a little different. They're asking for money to cover another position to enhance the museum. As I said before, when Darlene was hurt, thank God Linda was able to cover off for a month. The museum was still open. The visitor information was still open. I mean, if it's going to be Darlene by herself, I mean, what happens? What happens if Darlene can't be there? Then the museum's closed, the visitor information's closed, everything's closed.
Does Darlene have to be there for the visitor information center to
It's
be
in the
open?
museum.
But cannot somebody open it?
It's in the museum.
Oh, I see, like, oh,
It's
okay,
not-
I'm talking about the summer, when we have
Well, the summer,
staff.
yes.
Because the visitor information center really
Yes,
don't
in
need
the
it at
summer,
this
like
point.
Darlene will apply for step grants
Yeah.
to hire.
I see, to keep it open in the winter.
Right.
Yeah, we need, okay,
Yes.
I'm with you now.
Yeah. And it's not like you can close the visitor information center because it's in the museum. So people are going to come there to get that information. It's not like it's a separate building attached that you can, it's closed for 6 months.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you think these are considered differently. What about the rest of you? Or you think these need to be considered separately, or are they considered a part of the, I'll call it the main budget?
I think we need to evaluate all all three budgets, the museum, the library, and the rec department, on usage and how they also benefit and meet the needs, which is what we continually hear of our community, whether it's for people who live in the area or people who are looking into the area. It's very important we really look at it in that way, and that's why I think we asked Darlene for usage, and she was kind enough to give us some information that way. The library has given us lots of usage, and now we just have to wait to see what happens with our rec department, saying what their usage is, as well as their what their budget will look like. And I think they need to be seen that way because they are an enhancement to the community that in some ways you can't put a value on, but some ways you have to. So I think we need to look at how they add to our community and to people of the different economic ranges as well.
Okay. Any other comments on anything to add to that? I don't know if, okay, go ahead.
Just, I'm still a little bit confused because I think, Donnie, you're saying that you're taking the museum and thinking about it differently than the library. And then Mayor Panasic is saying do we treat them one way or do we treat them another way? So,
Right.
you know, but you're taking one and treating them like, is that what you're saying, is to treat one differently than the other? I mean, I think what you're saying is basically we've had an exceptional staff member in Darlene
Yes.
for a lot of years, and she's done a fabulous job of running a really efficient, low budget museum and high quality. So we don't get that a lot, but we have to look at it. We look at the whole picture because one day it might not be Darlene and somebody
Right.
might not be quite as diligent and not. But not to say that our library, and I know from being on the rec board that our rec department doesn't go out there and grant write and find grants, and I mean our pool slide and different things where lifts and stuff were all part of the grant program. But I get what you're saying. So I'm wondering if what we should be doing is actually listening and really taking a look at these budgets, so we understand, because we have a better understanding of what the museum wants, and make sure that we have an understanding of what the library is asking, because the library increase is, and that's what Councillor Gilroy was trying to say earlier, is based on staff increases mostly, but based on the fact that for the past couple of years they hadn't seen any increases, and now they put a training budget in because for a couple of years they did cut back and didn't send as many people to conference, and so now they would like to do that. So those are the things that they want us to consider. So should we be
Right.
looking
And
at
I
that?
believe with the library, their increase is on the training end of it, not so much the wages, because they still were given their step.
The step increases the budget.
Each budget.
Right here.
Yep.
Okay, good, Terry?
Just to elaborate on what Councillor Danak, I believe, is trying to say, the reason the museum should be considered different than the other two is because the fact the museum is not a 50-50% split with like it is with the other ones. They are relying more so on the town because they do get a little bit from the county, but it's not a 50-50 like the other two.
My question then is, Councillor Courtney, I'll let you go and then I'll,
So we own the museum.
Yes.
We own it.
Yep. Finally.
And it's right there.
Yep.
Okay. So why is she left all alone all the time?
She has no staff.
That's what I'm saying. It's our department, right?
No.
It's not our department
It's
of the
not our
town.
department.
We own it.
We own the building. We don't own the society. It's a separate society, and they're not an employee.
So who's the society then?
The museum.
The Hyperion District Museum Society.
That she's all alone in the society?
Well, no, we have a board.
Oh, there's a board. Okay, that's why I'm asking.
Yes.
I want to get clarification
She's the only
on.
employee that we have because with our meager $60,000 budget, there was no money to afford another person. So this increase is an ask to hire another person. It's not like it's not. They're not asking for a wage increase for the executive director. They're asking for money to cover a new position.
Okay. All I was just thinking was with the amount of staff we have in the town, I know it would be a juggling act, but why can't we not utilize some of our staff members maybe to offset some of her time, cross-train utilization, you know what I mean, back and forth. Maybe I'm stepping out of line, but I'm just saying. Yeah. Am I? Okay. Okay, see you tomorrow.
Since I started with the town in 1991, there's only been one staff member at the museum. So, and there was never ever, my knowledge, of an extra staff member.
Right, but at that point in time, they didn't have the visitor information center either.
And the library was contained in the museum until about 2003, 4, 5, somewhere.
That's true. That's a centennial building, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Sure, the little town and the library. I was just thinking out loud, like, just, you know, if it's staff and if it's training, or if it's, you know, instead of being left all alone.
It's warranted now.
It's warranted. Oh, absolutely.
in,
Can I just continue for a second?
sure.
So my opinion would be that it should be the same as the rest then. As far as whether you want to treat it differently or
Or the same.
the same, it should be the same.
As far as increases.
As far as looking at the budget. You talk
So-
about looking at the budget and increasing or decreasing.
Can I ask Donna one question if she doesn't answer it?
Sure.
So Darlene hasn't got a wage increase in a number of years, or is she still able to take a wage increase with her budget?
She hasn't had we haven't had a performance review on her for 3 years, so she hasn't had a wage increase for 3 years.
She's towing the line.
Well, I guess I'm hearing, is there going to be any fallout if we hold off on discussions with the library and the museum then until we do the rest of the budget? Or are they going to be okay till then? Well, they should be okay?
They should be okay because they're going off of last year's requisition. So they can still operate.
I think the only concern that I heard was the fact that she would like to go forward with, if she is allowed to hire the other person, with the advertising and everything else, so she can get somebody trained before the summer when she wants to take time off. I think that's the only thing.
Well, and hopefully we'll have our budget nailed down so she'd still have time to do that in time. And then I think I like Arlen's suggestion in the meantime, if she needs, to have all of that extra time off. I don't know how she's been taking time off in the past. How does she take time off?
Rachel Lake.
She just she might take a day here or.
But she hasn't been on a holiday
No,
and
I mean, she's taken when we close down is when she goes, like at Christmas time or whatever, like when we're
okay.
closed, she'll go. But to actually take an an extended period of time off together.
Together. Oh, yeah, that's not good either. You need to be able to get that time off, so. And I like Arlen's idea, if we can help her with that even in the interim, if she wants to, go down to somewhere.
The museum, it's a little different in this, like,
It's the training.
it's the training,
Yeah.
because they have to know, because they're around artifacts and exhibits, and if they have to do something with those, there's protocol and those things. It's not just, okay, you fill in for me for 8 hours today, and so basically you have somebody sitting at a desk, because they're not trained in the proper protocol on how to deal with artifacts. If there's filing and paperwork to do, they could be doing that, but they need to be trained because there's a system through the Alberta Museum Society that this is your filing system, this is coded, this is your numbering system. It's a standard thing.
Okay.
Big learning curve.
Okay, well, I think, unless I hear differently, I'll assume that we're all right to wait until we nail down the rest of the budget and go from there. Is that reasonable? Okay, I just wanted to know, because we are leaving them a little bit behind, but it sounds like they'll be able to get by until we finalize stuff. Councillor Courtney?
Don't get me wrong, I'm all for another person. But I was just putting it out there that maybe there's another way of bringing that other person in from people that we already have.
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
But I'm all for the extra money for an extra person. I really am, because it shouldn't be ran that way in the first place. So you should have secondary people to help and maintain, in my mind.
Okay, so we put that one down. We'll move to item 3.4, which is the rec board. And perhaps I'll ask Michael what he wanted to chat about on that one at this point.
Terry first.
Oh, sorry.
Just to let the council know, as of yesterday, Lori and I have pretty well nailed down the budget. She is trying to get together with her committee on Monday. I believe she's already tried to contact the two people on the committee, and then on the board, and then it'll go to the committee. We had worked extensively with Heather and Brian over the last few weeks, and the amount is pretty well almost exactly what I had estimated in the budget. She's knocked it down. We've knocked it down that much.
Okay. Did you?
Well, again, and that's fine, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure that everybody's worked hard and diligently on that. It's been unbelievably late, and being late is one thing. Being late perennially is irksome at best, and so for us to make any decisions based on a budget that contains a $1.8 million ask, and we have no idea of what it really is, and you want us to make decisions on it, I think we need to have that information in front of us to be able to review it, just the same as we've gone over the others. And it would be irresponsible of us to move forward without having an actual recreation budget. I think.
Well, absolutely. We can't approve a budget that we haven't seen, so we need to get that, and it sounds like it's moving forward. And I don't know if there's much more we can do on this budget at this point until we get some of that information and nail that down at this point.
And there may be some in-camera issues regarding personnel as well. There's some questions that some councillors have been discussing, and as to motions that were made by this council, and need to look at if that was in fact followed through. And I can't really go too much more into it because it would be a problem, I think, for the people who are employed there. But we need to talk about it. I think there's some information out there pertaining the rec department and its management team, and the contracts that they may or may not have.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that we said that there would be no contracts, that they'd be salaried employees. So that's just some of the things that we need to look at as well. I'm trying to be really, really positive here.
And that's a very good question that we can talk about. Definitely, we need to talk about that one. Councillor Gilroy.
Just to follow up to what our mayor suggested on Tuesday of this past week, when one of the suggestions might be to do a survey monkey before we go after any one of these budgets. I think it would be prudent to do a survey monkey on, and not necessarily have their departments do it, but we, through administration, if we could come up with some questions that would give us a better idea of how it's being used and what people think of the different ones, whether it's the museum, whether it's the library, whether it's the rec department, to give us a better idea of how we're investing the money. So I'm not specifically saying one department or another, I'm saying all three, so that we can have a better idea of, so that we can also justify how we then fund each of these groups. I think it's very important that we make sure that the ratepayers and also the people who are business owners have an opportunity to have their voice strongly heard. Good, bad, or otherwise. I think it's just important.
That's a very good segue into our next agenda item, which was item number 3.5, which was addressing the public. And, what, if anything, do we want to do at this point? But I totally agree with what you're saying, is to get some feedback. And should we be starting asking some questions now? But I think one thing, if we're going to ask questions, we got to have some specifics that they can respond to. For example, it's not enough to say, do you support the library? You got to say, would you support or do you support paying X amount for the library? Or, being more specific, would you support an increase for the museum or for recreation? Whatever department it is, or whatever, would you rather see a change in snow clearing to save X amount of dollars? Like, those are the specifics that we have to have. I'm going to get her because she had hers up, and then you can go. So,
when we were in the last AUMA, I think you were there for the EOP pre-sessions before the conference. There was I think it was citizen engagement was the topic, and they said when you're seeking the public's opinion, you have to be very specific in terms of what do you want to get from them. What are you asking them that you want them to answer? So you have to be very, very specific in terms of what information are you trying to get from them. So when you say be specific in terms of the questions, I think we have to be specific. Do you support this? What is your feeling about the rec board? How do you feel about the town sponsoring events? Because there's another option to reduce our costs would be the sponsorship grants that we give out, $30,000. Do we cut that out completely? Do we lower it to a lower amount, or do that kind of stuff? So if we're going to go with the survey monkey type format, when we post those questions, we need to be, well, we need to ask ourselves, what are we wanting back from the citizens, and then we sort of tailor the questions to get the results that we want, or the responses that we want on the issues.
Totally
Yes.
agree. That's what I meant by being specific. We need to know what we want and then ask the right questions as opposed to
answers to help us decide.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly.
Terry.
My comment's totally different. One of the things that you said was to show people how much they feel that they want to support the library, as an example. One of the things I did at one community, and I think I could probably do the same thing here, is it's almost like a pie chart of, let's say, 15% of our budget is for our equipment to maintain the roads. 10% is for administration, 15 or 25% is for recreation, or whatever the case may be. And then you can put that in such a way to tell the ratepayer, okay, of your $2,000 that you're paying per year, did you know that 400 of it is going to recreation? 200 is going towards the roads, etc. It's an approximate, and you'd have to take the utilities out, but it's something that I can probably work on if council wishes.
We're probably going to help that people will see where their money's going.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea to sort of set the tempo and then say, you know what, we can cut, you know, I mean, the purpose of this questionnaire is where could we save money? I mean, that's what we're looking at here. And so, you know, how would you feel if we, you know, got away with no enhanced policing? You know, and this was what would be the result. So they need to know sort of the costs, the pros and the cons, and then they can make a decision. Same thing with, you know, and specific ideas we have. Maybe, you know, like decreasing the hours of the pool. How would you feel if we only open the pool after 4 o'clock, or whatever the reduced hours were, but be that specific, and this would save us this amount of money. So that's what I see as specific.
And I think that's great. Probably the pie chart would give people a really good visual. And I think then the other thing could be, your questions could be somewhat general, but more like rating. Like, I wonder if we could ask a rating question, just to say, would you approve tax, or if there was going to be a tax increases, rate sort of the services of importance, right? So if we were going to have to reduce anything, so you go to the snow removal and street repair and like the things that are quite important, so people actually understand. One of it's education, because I think sometimes people don't even really pay attention to what all is involved in a municipality, right? So then they get to see, oh, these are all the things that, you know, like, do I want my garbage service cut? Do I want my snow removal to be a little less? You know, like, am I going to be okay with that? And then go into library, recreation, museum, like, so all those services are there, and then they can rate them as, and we can kind of get an idea of what the community sees is important. Like, we don't actually have to say, if we took out one session of swimming, and if the library that's open for 12 hours is only open for 6 hours, like, we don't, you know, because we don't really know what is the answer, right? But what do they think of is value? And then they only have to give us a rating of importance of services. Anyway, just a thought.
Councillor Gilroy.
Just to be on record, the only part that I'm concerned about with this, I trust that we'll make a good survey. All I would ask is that we decide a time frame where it has to be done. Say maybe a survey is done before the end of January, 1 week. We make sure it's available for that week, and then we make sure that high traffic areas, or even associations that use some of our facilities as well, that they get access to it so that we will get a really good response. And if it means making sure that we give notice to the Chamber of Commerce to give to their 100-odd businesses that are involved, or we give it to the library for all the patrons they have come in there, or the hockey arena for all their people, or send it home with the school kids for their parents to see. But say, this is the week we're doing it. This is the this is the link that we want you to do, and we will seriously consider everything that you respond to in that link during this week, so that it's very clear that they're important. We hit every major aspect of a taxpayer, and that includes people who don't think they have a lot of say because, say, they have a business in town, but they live in the county. Because if it comes to recreation, they're paying for it anyway, because they're paying half, especially with all these new things. So I just want to make sure we do it in such a way that we get maximum coverage. The wording, I trust that admin will do a great job, or that council with admin will do a great job. I just want to make sure we use every access to get the maximum number of respondents.
Yeah, and I think everybody would agree we want to get as much input as we can, absolutely. But you bring up a good question that we'd have to look at when we throw it open that way is what happens when we get people, and how would we'd have to give some thought is how would we restrict it so that we're not getting people that are not ratepayers with the county or the town answering these saying, because but they might use the facilities, those are just some things we'd have to think about.
But generally, if anybody who is interested in answering the survey is using the facilities, do we not want to kind of know regionally, what do people think?
Yeah.
What do they think? What do they use? What do they value?
Put on there, are you a tax ratepayer in town?
Yeah,
that
we could ask that.
Yes or no?
Well, we did that for the marijuana one, where we said, are you a resident?
Yeah.
And where are you a resident of?
Doesn't matter if you're a resident, but if you don't pay taxes.
Well, taxpayer or not, but they can still do the survey, but you're going to get that.
Then
You're going to get the feedback, right?
But then again, you run into the issue that we tend to have with voting. Well, I rent, so I are you a ratepayer in town? Well, I don't pay
your physical
taxes.
address, I guess. Is your physical we'd have to know their physical
I
address.
I don't pay taxes, but I rent. So you have those issues of people who don't think they can take it because they don't pay taxes.
Well, I think we should open it.
But I guess those are all some questions that we really have to think about, and you can see that to create these questions and to know what we want to get is going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort to get it right.
We don't have as much time, really, if we're...
Well, and so we need to, I guess, decide tonight if this is something we want to pursue, and if it is, then we have to go after it and set up some times to work on this. And then, the other option too, along with doing SurveyMonkey, is if we wanted to do another open house. But if we've got all of the information together, I would say an open house might be a good idea. But those are things that we need to come up with the questions. If we want to start that, let's get started, sit down and figure out what kind of questions we want and start drafting them out and go from there. Okay, Councillor Danaka, then Councillor Rose.
I think if we advertise it properly in such a way that it catches people's attention, an open house or a town hall or whatever you want to call it, I think is a really good way of doing it. That to get people to come out and say, this is what we're looking at, this is what we're facing, blah, blah, blah. And you can get people's opinions there. Like you may get 30 people, it's not going to be you're not going to get the number that you would sort of want to necessarily base your whole decisions on. But, you never know. But if it's advertised properly in a way that would get people interested in coming, and as opposed to just our typical static ad in the paper saying, hey, open house, come on down.
Totally
say
agree.
closing, library, pool, and arena.
Yeah.
Come to our open house.
Exactly. That would get people out.
Right. So, but
Get people right out of town.
But no, that's right. That's what I'm saying. Totally. But so all I was going to say to that is, I agree with Donna. I think that an open house is a great idea. But what about if we consider it as a wrap up to a survey? So run the survey, but just a few questions, like 3 or 4 questions. Like don't make it a really complicated thing. Just a few questions about. Basically, we're talking about, does anybody support cutting any type of service? Because you're saying, how do we save money? Well, that's important, how to save money or how to cut. But maybe the residents, so we're talking, this is our opinions, right? I know we're voted in to represent the residents, but give the residents an opportunity to say, I don't mind paying a little more because I want to live in a town with a library and a pool and a museum. I want those things. I don't want to move. I'd rather pay $100 a year. that's fine, right? So let them say that to us. Let them tell us. So because we're always telling each other what we think the residents want.
Yeah.
I would love to see that we get that response from the residents, from as many as possible. And I do think electronically a survey would probably get more than at the open house, but it might stimulate people to start talking about it if we had an open house at the end of it, especially if it was contentious, especially if we ended up with 500 respondents and people are saying, and then we started all this conversation, you might get a good turnout, right?
Yes.
But I think part of that is we have to have some ideas of where we want to go so we can get their input. I love that idea of saying, give us some ideas too, because, I mean, they might have great ideas we have never even thought of, right?
Yeah.
There
But-
are certain things that we, in a sense,
I like the pie chart idea,
Yeah.
where it says this is how it's being spent, but there's certain things where we can't say, well, for example, we need less gas people, or things like that. I think we need to specifically say, here's where we're spending it. How can we spend money better, if that's what you want to do it? No, well, as in that would be more like your priorities, and then have the hot button ones. I think would be very important ones, like the library, the museum, the rec department, that people are always talking about, and give them their chance to say something, as opposed to, well, we need less admin or stuff like that. There are certain things that we really need to be aware that maybe someone's got an axe to grind against someone in admin and thinks that they should be out of there. But it's, you know what I mean? Because
They might say they want less counselors.
hey, maybe they don't want to. Maybe they don't want a deputy mayor that attacks the churches. Who knows?
Maybe they want to tax
Maybe they want to tax
Maybe they want to.
I agree with what you're saying, but I think we need some specific ideas that we are considering so that they can weigh in on those specific questions. And we've been talking about many of those specific things when we talk about policing and we talk about recreation. We had some very specific ideas, and I think here were some ideas. What do you think of them? Would you support these? And so I love the idea of giving them a chance to get an input and getting an overall impression of what do they feel are the important items in town. But then also some specific questions that we've been considering and want their input on, because we've been tossing around lots of ideas on how we could save money, and place it that way. Here's some ideas that we've been thinking about. What are your thoughts on them? Would you support this? So there's lots of ideas there. I see lots of nods going on. I don't know if they're falling asleep or agreeing.
But I think that we as councillors should be very heavily into promoting this if we do it.
Yeah.
I think it's our responsibility.
How do we want to come up with questions, though? Because that's probably
No, I mean, as in distribution and getting participation.
Yeah, we all agree with that. We want to get that out there. So do we want to do this? Number one, that's the first question. And if we do, we need to do it fairly soon because it will help us with our budgets.
It's
A
historical.
survey is going to be a better response than an open hall.
Well, we can.
You're
We
gonna
can start with a survey, though, and maybe we could still get them both.
It may be historical, but I think Councillor Rose has a second good point. I hardly ever agree with you. Yeah, no, really. Where I like the idea of the survey and then the wrap-up. Because then you're saying, this is what we got out of your survey, let's have your response to what we've got, and let's put a face to to your decisions and stuff like that. So it really shows that we're trying to engage with them.
So who is in support, with a show of hands, of doing this, and it would doing this public engagement and getting it started, which would mean another meeting to sort of nail things down and get things written out, and then starting to proceed with it. So those that would be in favor of doing this? Yeah, well, and opposed to it? One opposed. No, I think, okay. Why are you opposed, Darla?
Why am I opposed? I think that everybody knows. I know people that I talk to. You know people you talk to. You know people you talk to. And we bring all that here. We know what the general public thinks. They don't want to spend money. They want all the services. They want all the services here. they don't wanna pay for it. We know that.
But Arlen, do your people want recreation?
Sure. I want recreation.
Most people don't, so you know what I mean, like, there's people in different.
They do.
Nobody said they don't want
No.
recreation.
Nobody says they don't want a recreation, they don't wanna pay for it.
Point.
Sorry,
Now
I
argues
just-
the
I just
point
like-
to make sure that we look at recreation. It's not a carte blanche,
Right,
this is
and all
a
I'm
nice
saying
big pool and this is nice two
Just
arenas,
ask
so
people
they're.
so we actually get their response. So we don't come here and say, we know this is what people want.
Well, what I'm
And the
saying
people
is-
I have don't care about.
Okay,
really
hold
care
on,
about
you guys,
hockey.
let's
They
go in
want-
point of order. Arlen was talking, let him finish.
Sorry.
The point is, it's a community that we know well, and that's why we're here. We know everybody wants all the services, but they want it at the discounted price, they want everything available, but they don't wanna pay for it, or if they have to pay for it, it's at a reduced value or whatever, and that's where their taxes come into play. We know that. So we can spend all kinds of time doing surveys, doing everything, and come up with the same answer. We're there. Our recreation in general, we have the best recreation facilities and the best recreation in the north compared to even other communities, other than the brand new facilities like in Grand Prairie, or even, for example, the one they're building in Peace River right now, or Grimshaw. But we only pay 50% of the expenses. 50%. Where other communities pay 100%. 50%. 100%. It makes sense. I mean, we can hammer on the expenses and stuff like that, but we're still only paying 50%, which is a great value for us and our community. It's a great deal we've got set up for our members of the town. They have great facilities at 50% expense. So you gotta keep that in mind. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll go 1, 2, and then 3.
My hand was up,
And-
and then Donna's, then his.
Oh.
She can go
And
with
so,
it.
and so yes, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we do have a great deal.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
But
not.
we have to fine tune it and make sure it's
Okay,
running.
let him
Sure.
finish and then.
No.
Yeah.
And I'll get my auto face out. What do you mean?
We'll put a wall.
So, but I think that that we're having these discussions because we're finding ourselves being fiscally tightened and finding the belt having to be tightened more and more and more. And so even though it's a great deal at 50%, it's only a great deal if you can afford it. And so it's not a sale if I go to Walmart and buy that $500 TV because it's 50% off, but I can't afford the $500 TV. So unfortunately, yeah, we are looking at having to look at some sort of paring, sharpening the knife, cut, reduction services, something. And because the recreation department is such a big department for us to have now, and because one of the reasons and rationales that I had for the dissolution of the rec board and having the recreation department come in is so that we could actually have some say and control over what it is that we need to look at. Can we afford this Cadillac? And now that it's here, and now that it is in our jurisdiction, we can say, maybe we need a GMC, or I'm not even going to use GMC, but maybe we need a cheaper version of that Cadillac. We've said it before with the library. Do we need a Cadillac library, or do we need something a little less? And now that the rec department is ours, those are the discussions we can have, and we should be having.
Granted.
Glad you didn't use Volvo. Donna?
Nah.
Oh, good. Oh, she was first.
Yeah, first, then I had my hand up.
needing sort of the feedback that you think we know. I think part of what I like to do it, and part of what we learn in these community engagement sessions, is it is an education piece. And we kind of know that we're likely to get the responses that we think we're going to get, but we're actually teaching people along the way. Just like we're sending the newsletters out. Like, they kind of know bits and pieces, but when Terry hears the muddling and they're concerned about something, she can nail down something in the newsletter, and then the rest of the people that read it say, oh, yeah, okay, well, that's, maybe I misunderstood, or they pass it along to their neighbors. So we educate the community on what the town does with their tax dollars. So I think it's a good time to sort of do that, right? We can make that list of, here are the services, and if we're going to say, rate the services of importance, and we can make that announcement about recreation now is a department of the town. You know, if we're going to look at any changes, then that can be part of a question right in there, right? Like, so it can be kind of that education. I think you're right. I think you're going to find out what you think you already know. You know, like we're going to be, I don't think we're going to be that surprised.
I hope so.
You know, and that's it. So maybe we'll find that there's a whole different thinking in the community. But I do think that, like, when people don't really think about fire safety, they don't think about the fire department, right? They don't think about the cost of it. If we ask them straight up, if they needed it, until they actually think about it, and then they realize, the volunteer hours, and they realize the cost of, the equipment, then they see the value in it again, right? That when they actually need it, but they don't actually even think of it as I don't think we look at the list and tick them all off until we're faced with that list. So I agree that I support the idea of putting it out there as a survey, and maybe doing an email meeting for questions, or at least starting it via email instead of having a session like this to have questions. I think we can finalize it maybe at a meeting, but maybe we could throw questions at administration, and you guys could try to come up with some ideas from that. Donna?
Well, I think the survey, as Councillor Rose had said, will give us the input from the people and we may think we know the answers, but we may be surprised by what we actually get, because we're thinking, we think, maybe people are okay with as an example, because we're in winter, the snow plowing, but they might be okay with maybe not plowing as often, even though we think, because it's been that way for so long, that maybe they're okay with less plowing. So we may get answers to questions that we think we know, and I agree with what Councillor Long said in terms of, yes, it's a good deal, but it's only a good deal if you can afford it. And that's just something that we really need to look at in terms of the rec board and the usage of those facilities that we have. And I think that we may be surprised by what we get in terms of a response from the citizens regarding to whatever questions we put out there. And I don't necessarily want to see this really big, cumbersome 20 question thing. If we can keep it to a minimum of like 5 to 7, people may be a little bit more, and then have a comment section and they can put their comments in there.
Councillor Gilroy and Councillor Stenhouse.
Not to sound prideful, but one of the things I really enjoy when I go around town is when you hear shop owners and other people say, "Thank you for asking me. I don't feel as though sometimes I have a voice." And that's not to do whether or not we've done this or not. It's just that there are people in this community who they may, whether we would agree or not, they feel as though they don't have a voice. And so to me, it's, here's your chance to say your piece. You're paying the freight to get this done. And then when it's all said and done, we have given you an opportunity to speak. If you choose not to accept that responsibility, then we're going to remind you of that when you start complaining. But if you do have something constructive that you would love to say, and that you love this town enough to invest in it this way, then your voice is heard because, as I said, you're paying the freight. And I think it's important because especially the young people need to also know that we will listen. And I think that's a very important thing for a growing community. As opposed to going to A&W and hearing the guys, oh, I won't get into it because I can't say those words. But, but as I said, it's just saying that we care enough that whether you live in this town, in fact, I would include in that survey the county councillors, because they do pay for half a rec department and they do pay for half of the library and a few others. And we want to make sure that they understand that their opinion as well does count for something, because they represent people who do pay for some of our services as well. Not just our little bit here, because they do offer considerable support, financial support to this town. So I would just want to make sure that we work together as much as possible on that to develop, quote, the good partnerships.
Councillor Stenhouse.
Okay, so I think Bylaw did a fantastic job of putting together that little survey for cannabis, and we're having a Bylaw meeting on Monday. We could throw it. We could throw it at Bylaw to get the ball rolling. But about this engagement, I find garbage is still a hot topic in this town. That's on their mind. We're throwing an open house. Let's just throw it. I know we're talking about budgets and we're talking about taxes. That's a hot topic too. I honestly believe we're going to have a good turnout with a survey and an open house. It's there. It's people got time on their hands now. Like I said, the holidays are over. Like you said, you'd be surprised at what people don't know, because from my own experience over the holidays, I was asked, where does our tax dollars go? And when I started telling them, they were like, okay, that I will support, that I won't. So it's there. It's there.
Yeah, and
It's certainly a good thing, like we mentioned a few times, is the education part and taking the time. We had, Arlen generated a lot of discussion after a different, because it's a different way of looking at things, and that's one of the beauties of our conversations we were talking with Donna about this afternoon, is those different viewpoints really make sure that we think about things.
The beauty of democracy is that we're going to have a survey anyways.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. But I'm just curious, did you start playing steel guitar there, Nancy? I noticed that.
So Brian notices.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, what I've heard is we want to do a questionnaire. We've had a few different ideas about how to do it and when, and maybe we'll leave that with administration to give some thought of how and when, and we can bring it back to our next council meeting with a motion on when we're going to run it and how we're going to do it.
I'll be in Mexico, by the way.
You know what? Yeah.
So if council could forward me any questions that could possibly be put on the questionnaire, whatever.
Can we start with what topics should be on there, as opposed to questions?
You could probably send them whatever you like.
Okay.
Yeah,
You can organize
and
them
we need
after.
to start with that information piece. That was a great idea.
Distributed to all councils.
Yeah. Okay, so we can.
That we look at it before it goes out, just so we're.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think we still need to get together and discuss some of the specific questions that we might have, and we need, in my mind, we still need dollar amounts to say, this is what it would mean on your tax bill, so they can think about that. I tweaked something there with that, eh?
Could we not, with Terry's pie chart, the little tiny brown spot, that little sliver that's going to be the museum, you click on it and it comes up saying,
No clicking.
and you click onto the pie chart, and it would say 2% or 1.5% of the budget.
I'm going to have a legend
Or a
next
legend
to the pie chart.
You don't want to interact.
Yeah, I don't want it interactive. It's too much work right now, and I am a month behind in my work for the audit because of budget stuff. Normally, this is finished in the middle of December, and I can start working on year end. I am behind, so I don't want to spend much time on it. I'm going to do quick and simple only. If you guys want something in more detail next year, maybe. Not this year.
Okay. Okay, now is there anything else that we need to discuss here tonight before we adjourn?
Just food for thought. I know the rec board has been hit hard through Michael and whatever, but you got to remember that them facilities were voted on by the public on a plebiscite to build them facilities. So, as Arlen said, at 50% funding from the county, which they also did the same, basically plebiscite, that to warrant an increase yearly to keep them facilities maintaining, I don't think council has to stress too much about increasing taxes somewhat to continue to carry them facilities. This is only my thought, but it's just to throw it out there that the plebiscite was the majority, and that's why them facilities are there. And I believe if you were looking at closing anything, you would probably have to take it back to plebiscite to close them. So.
Councillor Long, then Councillor Gilroy.
Respectfully, I don't think so. But what I hear from the plebiscite is that there was supposed to be a recreation complex, and people voted in favor of having a pool, swimming pool, arena complex, and then the pool was built expeditiously because they were worried about funding, and the mayor at the time wanted it built ahead. Am I right so far?
That was his legacy.
I didn't say that.
It
And
was
so,
voted on their taxes, like we knew that it was going to be a standalone pool when we voted.
but initially when it was discussed, it was a levy to fund a recreational complex.
That was the goal.
That was
But
the
that
goal.
was not the plebiscite, I believe. I believe the plebiscite was, this is what yes, and this is what it's gonna cost.
Yeah.
And this is how long it's gonna take to pay it off.
And so if the pool is the issue, then that makes it easier for us to look at one or two arenas. Do we need two arenas? Is there enough usage for two arenas to warrant that? But at the end of the day, the building was built, the pool was built to run, but not to run at a loss. Let me rephrase that. Not to run it regardless of the fact that it's running at a loss. It still needs to be run as fiscally responsible as possible, and we just can't allow it to balloon out because the plebiscite said they wanted it. So if we can only run it for 7 months of the year or 8 months of the year, so be it.
Who was the other, was it you? I can't remember who was the second one. It was you, okay, sorry.
Personally, I wasn't here when the plebiscite was done, but I don't think that would affect changing the actual usage of something like that second arena, where it can still be used as an arena when it is needed, but when it is not needed, it can be repurposed for some other reason, so that it is used to its maximum. But I think the most important thing here is if we ask the questions such as Councillor Long has just suggested on our survey, then the people who are really serious about what they want to see in this town, because the demographics have changed, I think, since the plebiscite, then these are the people who right now are the taxpayers, and they deserve to have a right to say, this is what we want, and if they don't want it, at least they've been heard. That's all I want. That's all I want to hear is, do they want us to continue status quo, or do they want to see some changes? Let's hear from them.
Okay, any other things to bring up before we wrap up?
Anything on the fire department or not? Ken's looking at replacing one of the fire trucks that are overdue. And
Yeah, one of our trucks is 2 years overdue now. According to NFPA standards, they're supposed to be replaced every 20 years. One we have now is 22 years old. And I've been after for the last 10 years to start putting money into reserves for a truck. And the last treasurers said, yeah, but they never ever did put any money away. So now it's time to buy a truck and we don't have money. What do we do? I mean, what happens when the insurance company comes into town and says, well, your insurance rates are gonna go up because you don't have a truck that covers NFPA standards? So, I don't know.
so a truck is approximately $500,000.
Yeah.
So council committed, I believe they said $50,000 this year to reserves to start last year. So
It was just this year.
Yeah.
We put 50,000 last
So
year.
we're 10% there.
In 2018, it was not put into the budget. I had suggested it was put into budget. It was one of the things that was cut. I had left it highlighted, and if there was money left over, then hopefully we can still put something aside. There's 2 reserves in the fire department. The other reserve is for the MVA, and the MVA reserve, that one cannot be used for the truck because the county will not support that because they have their own truck. They'll help for the building, but then stuff like that, they won't help for the truck.
What about grants for a fire truck? Can we get grants for that? Is there things out there?
I only heard all this the past couple days. I hadn't had a chance to do any research. I usually do the research for grants once I got majority of the year-end stuff done. But I don't know. I've never looked for that one, so I can't say if there is or isn't. I have no idea.
Ken, do you know if other communities have gotten grants for trucks, or is it? Could you do that? Because I mean, it's a bit of a shocker to get that we need it now, right? Like I know we've heard about it a little bit.
For the last couple of years, our truck is due 2 years ago, and now.
But
the thing is, I just talked to them the other day, and it's a year and a half from the time that you order the truck till the time it gets built. So even if we order it now, it's still going to be a year and a half from now before we get it. I mean, they're so far behind.
But it has never been on our capital list as one of the projects, right? That's yeah.
There's also debentures to buy a truck too, right?
There's also, sorry?
Debenture. You could buy
Oh.
a used debenture.
Yeah.
And pay it off
You
over.
buy a slightly secondhand, like 5-year-old one.
$50,000 a year.
I saw they were driving one to Mexico there on TV.
Put the fire out of the wall.
Okay.
So, how come then we haven't been amortizing? If the amortization is such a big part of our budget in every other department, how is this not being amortized?
The councils, prior to my time here and with the previous treasurers, I'm not sure where the responsibility was. It was never put into the budget.
So it's just like we pick and choose what we.
Like I said, I wasn't here at the time, so I can't speak, but I know I've talked to Ken, like I said, about it the past couple of years, so I'm aware of it as of the last couple of years, and I did put it in the budget, but it got taken out last year, and I think the year before also. But I did not know until just this past day or two that it had to be done immediately, that there was restrictions. That was something that was totally news to me.
To avoid sticker shock of what we're going through right now, is it possible to have this brought up within the next meeting or two so that we're not putting all the pressure on administration with some options for us to discuss, as opposed to he said, she said, they said, we should have done, they should have done right now? Can we have time to think about this and see what our options are before we spend a lot of time going over this right now?
Oh, some of that money could have been put away, but then when Herb was here and took out the restricted reserves and lumped it all into the one reserves, so that is a possibility too. So
well, at one time I was positive we had 265 or $275,000 put away, and that was for the last 15 years that we were doing billing for motor vehicle accidents. That was before the time that the MD made us put it into a special reserve. And I don't know whatever happened to the money. Maybe it just got spent.
Yeah, and the little bit of research that I did do, I had to do more research, but the little bit of research I did do, I think I spoke with Ken about this last year, when the renovations happened on the building a few years back, that reserve all went towards that, is what I was able to find, but I haven't been able to confirm it. So.
Councilor Courtney?
Now we got a big empty Taj Mahal.
I know.
Magic carpet. Right? That'll work. So if we agree to, which I think we should, put the 50,000 annually towards equipment, is that something that the county would match?
No.
They will not.
They bought a fire car.
Yeah, they own two of the trucks.
Yeah, I understand that, but maybe if it's a bigger fancier truck, that would
No,
help them
I
out.
spoke already to the treasurer and at the county, and when this came up during the fire
I was there.
committee, yeah, and we spoke afterwards and stuff, and she said the county would not pay for a new truck. They have their own trucks. They are not going to fund our trucks. They will help fund the building. They will help stuff that they don't have, but something that they already pay for, they're not going to pay twice and pay for half of ours.
But if we unify our services,
I don't know.
oh, Michael.
Because, I mentioned it to all my guys, and I think if that happens, if the county takes over running the fire department, I think we're gonna be stuck left with nobody on the fire department.
Okay. No, I just.
Guys are not happy with the way things are being run on the county side,
Really?
and, so,
They want to be standalone.
they wanna be, like, we don't wanna be part of the. Now with John McDermott running the fire departments, he's taken away all the, all the trucks had G-Sarge, Drouard on the doors. Now that's all gone. The trucks are all just Big Lakes County. That's it. All their shirts and their uniforms and everything, their patches, their shoulder patches, that's all gone. It's all Big Lakes County. That's it. So they're all together as one. And John has big intentions of doing Knife Prairie exactly the same. He wants to just, we won't be Knife Prairie Fire Department. We will be the Big Lakes County Fire Department. And all our guys here that are not, we'll have nobody on the fire department. I mean,
Yep.
I'm gonna be leaving in June, so, I guess what happens after June, I don't really care, but I know we're not gonna have a fire department if that happens.
I wondered if that would be the turn of events with that happening. Okay.
Yeah,
Just curious.
Talking to the guys, I know the guys aren't happy, so, it's just the way things are being.
So, I think we like the suggestion of coming back with this on an agenda item when we have some more information and some ideas, and then we can go from there. But it is a bit of a shocker. Get it now.
But again, you did it on the convention. Now debt's at an all-time low, so for interest rates, now's the time to buy it. Not when it's 8%. Pardon me?
And then we have a surplus in account, we just
Okay. Okay, now we're degenerating. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned.